The stars shimmered beyond the viewport, indifferent witnesses to humanity's humiliation. Commander Elias Vance watched them in silence, fists clenched behind his back, the polished floor of the Earth Assembly's war room reflecting the tension written across every face. They had lost another colony, this time without a single shot fired. It hadn't even been a battle. It was a message. Across from him, President Miriam Solane's voice trembled with controlled fury. They destroyed New Kyoto's atmosphere generators. 15 million dead. They didn't even bother to claim the planet. The assembled leaders shifted uncomfortably, their holographic forms flickering around the vast room. Old alliances had crumbled. Trust had become a currency too expensive to spend. Humanity, once idealistic in their first steps onto the galactic stage, now stood broken-backed under the weight of alien exploitation. 1,000 alien species filled the void beyond Earth's orbit, bound together in a sprawling galactic confederacy that prided itself on order and peace. Order for them meant human servitude. Peace meant humanity paying in blood. Commander Vance remained silent, studying the faces around him. Some demanded retaliation. Others whispered of surrender. But Vance knew better. They had no fleets left. Their best scientists had been taken. Their resources stripped. They were a civilization bleeding out in the cold dark. Until today, the transmission that had come in an hour earlier was still playing on a loop, burned into every mind present. A grainy image of the Rakali ambassador, his many-jointed arms dripping with human blood, boasting of Earth's inevitable fall. They no longer needed pretend, he said. Humanity was a cautionary tale, a reminder to other species of what happened to those who dare to hope. They believe we are finished, Solane said, voice now cold, almost attached. They believe we are weak. Vance finally spoke, his voice a low rasp against the room's heavy silence. Then let them believe it a little longer. All eyes turned to him. Solane's brow arched. You have a proposal, Commander? Vance tapped a small device on the table. Instantly, a different hologram replaced the smug Rakali face. Blueprint of sleek, unknown ships, strange energy signatures, schematics that no official Earth scientist had ever presented. Project Revenant. Vance said, for the last 20 years, while the Confederacy bled us dry, we built in secret. Weapons they can't even imagine. Ships they think we were too primitive to design. You're lying. Admiral Kepler spat, eyes wild. We have no resources, no fleets left. We're barely holding Earth's orbit. That's the story we let them believe, Vance interrupted sharply. And they bought it. Every skirmish we lost, every concession we made, calculated. A mask we wore while we prepared. Shock rippled through the assembly. Some murmured in disbelief. Others leaned closer, a flicker of hope kindling in eyes long dulled by despair. President Solane stepped closer, studying Vance as if seeing him for the first time. You risked everything. No, Vance said quietly. I preserved everything. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Solane nodded, a slow and grim acknowledgement. Where are these fleets? Hidden in the outer belt, shielded, silent, fully operational, waiting for the signal. And you propose we strike? Solane asked. No, Vance replied. I propose we end them. The words hung in the air, heavy with promise and dread. A few leaders visibly recoiled. Others leaned forward with feral hunger. Solane narrowed her gaze. And what happens after? We rebuild, Vance said simply, but not under their laws, not in fear. Humanity will never kneel again. Silence stretched again, but it was different now, charged, electric. Across the room, decisions were being made behind guarded eyes. Old dreams of peace were dying, smothered under the new and savage reality. A soft chime echoed through the war room. An aide rushed in, breathless, pale. Madam President, he stammered. The Confederacy, their fleets are moving. They're preparing for a full assault on Earth. Vance smiled for the first time in weeks, a thin, wolfish curve of the lips. They think they're about to crush us, he said. Good. Solane straightened, the weight of leadership settling around her shoulders like armor. Commander Vance, you have authorization. He bowed his head. It will be done. Without another word, he turned and strode from the room. Behind him, the assembly erupted into hurried strategy discussions, old divisions fading under the hammering urgency of survival. As he walked the corridor toward the hidden command center deep beneath the assembly, Vance allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He thought of the first settlers on Mars, their dreams of unity. He thought of the scholars and engineers, their knowledge plundered. He thought of the children, his own son among them, snatched by alien slavers, never to be seen again. They had pushed humanity too far. Now, the galaxy would learn what fear truly was. In the cold hangars of the outer belt, silent fleets stirred from their slumber. Cannons powered by dark matter pulsed to life. AI-controlled dreadnoughts, each one smarter and more ruthless than their creators, ran final diagnostics. Humanity's vengeance was no longer a whisper. It was a storm gathering on the horizon, and nothing, no plea, no surrender, no apology, would stop it. Not this time. The stars beyond the warship's bridge were colder than Vance remembered. He stood at the prow of the Resolute, Earth's new flagship, as the final sequence for Operation Phoenix began. Around him, vast shadows moved through the void. An entire armada cloaked by technology unknown to the galaxy, the culmination of human desperation and ingenuity. "Final systems check complete," said Lieutenant Arya Chun, her voice crisp, her dark eyes shining with fierce determination. She had grown up under Confederacy occupation, had seen her family torn apart. She did not serve for glory. None of them did. They served for survival and for vengeance. Vance nodded, feeling the weight of every soul aboard the fleet. All units, prepare for Phase 1. The command echoed through secure channels. Across the scattered formation, battleships shifted into attack vectors. Carrier bays opened like the jaws of sleeping giants, and drones swarmed out in disciplined silence. In the dark, humanity's fury coiled, ready to strike. The first target lay ahead, the Confederacy Sector Command Hub orbiting Varda 3, a massive installation, shielded and armed, arrogant in its presumed invincibility. It had overseen countless operations against Earth and her colonies. Its destruction would be the Confederacy's first taste of terror. "Visual confirmation," Chin reported. "No alert. They have no idea we're here. They will," Vance said, as the Resolute slipped into engagement range. He allowed himself a rare glance at the personnel files scrolling across his private display. Faces of men and women he had personally selected. Survivors, fighters, ghosts resurrected for a single purpose: to remind the galaxy what humanity could become when pushed too far. "Deploy the Shade Wings," Vance ordered. From the flanks, Black Hole fighters ignited their stealth drives, becoming little more than shadows against a starry backdrop. The Shade pilots, all volunteers from fallen colonies, had trained for years for this moment. They would cripple the station's defenses in a surgical strike. Quick, clean, ruthless. Shade Wing 1 entering target perimeter, crackled a voice over comms. The first blast came, so suddenly the station didn't even register it. An explosion of blue-white light tore through the outer defense ring, shearing armored structures apart like paper. Seconds later, internal alarms lit up the station's hull like a wounded beast. "They're awake now," Chin said, almost smiling. Vance kept his expression cold. "Begin the assault." "No quarter." The Resolute surged forward, joined by her sister ships, the Vengeance, the Nemesis, the Eclipse. Each vessel unleashed weapons the galaxy had never seen. Railguns accelerating projectiles to relativistic speeds, dark energy beams slicing through void shields, and smart missiles that thought faster than any organic mind. The Confederacy's response was predictably slow. Arrogance dulled even the sharpest blade. By the time their patrol fleet scrambled, half the sector hub systems were failing, fire venting into space. "Enemy ships incoming," Chin said, her fingers dancing over the tactical console. "Hundreds of them." "Good," Vance murmured. He tapped the control on his chair. "Release the harvesters." Hidden within the larger battleships, monstrous AI-controlled drones launched into the fray. Each harvester was a thing of nightmare. Semi-organic, semi-machine, designed to cripple enemy ships from within. They punched through hulls, injected virus programs into mainframes, and detonated reactor cores from inside. The Confederate fleet tried to adapt, tried and failed. On the enemy bridge, a panic transmission leaked across open channels. Unknown human forces, requesting reinforcements. System breach in progress. The voice cut off with a static scream as a harvester tore the bridge apart. Vance sat motionless, watching the chaos unfold. His mind was already on the next step. They could not afford to win slowly. Every second they delayed risked the Confederacy uniting against them. "Begin Phase 2, he said. On command, a second, larger wave of ships emerged from hidden jump points. Carriers disgorged troop pods, delivering strike teams onto a fractured station and surviving enemy ships. No prisoners would be taken. No messages of negotiation would be sent. Only silence and ruin. Among the first aboard was Captain Sarah Holt, leading a squad to the flaming corridors of the station. Vance watched her helmet feed as she moved with brutal precision, cutting down defenders with plasma fire and breaching sealed doors with microcharges. At one junction, a Ricali officer surrendered, throwing down his weapon, chittering for mercy in broken Terran standard. Holt shot him in the head without breaking stride. There would be no forgiveness today. By the end of the assault, the sector hub was nothing more than twisted debris orbiting a dead world. The Confederate reinforcement arrived too late to save it and too disorganized to fight effectively. They died by the thousands, their ships turned into drifting tombs. Vance leaned back in his chair, letting the weight of the victory settle over him. It was a beginning, nothing more. A warning whispered in blood and flame. "Commander," Jin said, breaking the silence. "Incoming transmissions from multiple Confederate systems. They're panicking." "Let them," Vance replied. The Confederacy had ruled through fear for centuries. Now, they would understand what true fear was. All ships. Vance said over fleet-wide comms, his voice carrying an iron promise. "Prepare for Phase 3. No retreat. No mercy. The time of hiding is over. Humanity rises tonight." A chorus of affirmatives echoed back, not mechanical responses, but the snarling agreement of a species that had been chained too long. As the fleet moved toward the next target, Vance allowed himself a moment to gaze at the shattered remnants of the sector hub. Sparks flared among the ruins, tiny dying lights drifting into the void. This was only the beginning. The galaxy had underestimated humanity once. It would not survive doing so again. In the heart of the Confederacy, the Senate convened an emergency session for the first time in 3 centuries. Ancient marble pillars soared around the vast chamber, but there was no awe in the air today, only fear. Alien senators, 100 different species, bickered and shouted, their translators struggling to keep up, their voices overlapping into a frantic, rising storm. At the center of the chaos stood Archon Virex, Supreme Administrator of Confederacy Military Affairs, his gray crest slicked tight against his reptilian skull. He pounded a clawed fist against the speaking podium, sending a cracked spiderwebbing through the stone. "Silence!" he roared, his voice amplified until it shook the very walls. The chamber stilled, but the tension coiled tighter, like a predator waiting to strike. "You have all seen the reports. You know what they have done." He flung a claw toward the hovering displays showing endless footage. Earth fleets cutting through Confederacy defenses like razors, stations falling, colonies burning. The humans have declared war, not rebellion, not insurrection. War. A ripple of fear swept through the assembly. The Confederacy was not used to war, not real war. It had maintained order through intimidation and superior numbers for generations. Now the predators were bleeding. "We must crush them immediately," Virex snarled. "Deploy every fleet, every soldier. Exterminate their species to the last cell. And if we fail," whispered a soft voice from the shadows. All heads turned. Emerging from the dim recesses of the Senate Hall came an old figure, Chancellor Lyrioth, whose species had ruled stars before humanity had even discovered fire. He moved slowly, his many tendrils wrapped in ceremonial gold, his ancient gaze steady. "We already failed. Archon Virex," Lyrioth said. "The moment we underestimated them, the moment we taught them to fear, to suffer, we forged the very weapon now turned against us. Virex bared his teeth in a snarl. Enough philosophy. What is your proposal? Old one. That we surrender? No, Lyrios said. I propose we remember why we formed this confederacy. We did not merely conquer. We manipulated. We isolated threats before they could rise. Humanity slipped through because we grew complacent. A low murmur of agreement spread through the senators. Virex slammed a clawed hand against the podium. Words will not save us. No, Lyrios agreed, but strategy might, and desperation can. He tapped the control. A new display blossomed into view. A hidden human research outpost, long thought abandoned after Earth's fall. But new data showed otherwise. Energy readings off the scale, exotic matter signatures unknown even to the Confederacy's brightest minds. They have created something beyond ships and weapons, Lyrios said. Something primal. A new engine of destruction. Virex stared at the images, suspicion warring with curiosity. What is it? A weapon, Lyrios said, but also a doorway. The old Chancellor's voice dropped, heavy with dread, a way to reach into places no sane mind would touch. Virex leaned forward, scenting blood. And if we seize it, we end this war before it consumes us all. In the cold silence that followed, the Senate reached a grim consensus. A task force would be formed, elite, ruthless, and desperate enough to do what centuries of law and pride have forbidden. Meanwhile, far from the political halls, aboard the Resolute, Commander Vance met with his inner circle. They gathered in the war room. Captain Holt, grim and scarred from the last boarding action, Arya Chun, sharp-eyed and relentless, and Director Tane, a former intelligence operative whose methods were often as brutal as they were effective. The hollow table before them flickered, showing the next sequence of targets. They're rattled, Holt said, arms crossed. Confederate systems are pulling resources from their outer colonies to reinforce their core worlds. Easy pickings if we want them. We don't have the luxury of a slow grind, Chin said. They'll adapt. They're starting to. Vance nodded. His face was carved in stone. That's why we strike at their heart. He tapped the control. The image shifted. A star system at the center of the Confederacy's power network, Viridian Prime. Destroying Viridian will sever their command structure, Vance said. It will force the Senate into chaos. Force them to tear each other apart. It's suicide, Tane said bluntly. Their defenses around Viridian are layers deep. Shield arrays, mobile artillery, planetary defense grids. We'll lose half the fleet before we breach orbit. Vance's mouth twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. Not if we go through the Obsidian Rift. Even Holt's hardened expression faltered. The rift's unstable. No sane navigator would take a fleet through it. Exactly, Vance said, which is why they won't expect it. The Obsidian Rift was a collapsed starfield, a broken graveyard of gravity storms and magnetic shears. Hundreds of Confederacy scouts had died trying to chart safe passage through it, but humanity had studied it for decades in secret, and they had found a way. Arya Chen's eyes glittered. You're serious. Deadly, Vance said. He leaned in, lowering his voice. They built this galaxy thinking no one would ever challenge their rules. No one would ever dare. We're about to prove them wrong again. The room fell into grim, charged silence. Each officer understood the stakes. If they succeeded, the Confederacy would shatter. If they failed, there would be no survivors. We'll need volunteers, Tane said at last. You already volunteered the moment you stepped onto the ship, Vance replied. And so it was decided. Humanity would gamble everything on one final thrust through the jaws of death itself. As preparations began, Vance stood alone in the observation deck, gazing out at the swirling nebulae beyond. A small hollow image flickered to life in his palm. A photo of his son, smiling, untouched by the horrors of war. I'll bring you a future, Vance whispered, even if I have to burn their whole damn galaxy to do it. Behind him, the Resolute's engines rumbled to life, and the fleet shifted formation, aligning toward the dark heart of the rift. The galaxy had yet to see what true human fury could unleash. It was about to learn. The stars themselves seemed to tremble. The rift was a churning maelstrom of darkness and violence. Gravity wells yawned open like hungry mouths. Radiation storms flared and died in heartbeat intervals. No charts, no markers. Only instinct and precision kept the fleet alive as it plunged deeper into the chaos. On the bridge of the Resolute, Commander Vance stood rigid, hands locked behind his back. His gaze never wavered from the holographic projections ghosting over the main screen, each pulse representing a ship tethered survival by the thinnest of threads. Trajectory stable, Ariachin reported, voice strained but steady. Sweat beaded on her brow as she wrestled with the constantly shifting variables. "Maintain course," Vance ordered. His voice carried a grim, magnetic calm that rippled through the crew like a current of steel. Outside the hull, flashes of dying stars painted the void with insane, beautiful patterns. One wrong calculation, and the fleet would vanish without even the mercy of wreckage. Warning: Graviton shear approaching, 500 kilometers port side. The ship's AI announced coldly. Adjust 5 degrees starboard. Chimbarked, fingers flying. The Resolute shuddered as the maneuver jolted her off the lethal trajectory by mere meters. Vance allowed no emotion to show. Fear was a poison best reserved for the enemy. At the fleet's rear, 3 cruisers succumbed to the rift's hunger. Their death screams crackled over comms for half a second before silence devoured them. No one spoke their names. They had known what they were risking. Every soul in this armada was already a ghost, bargaining against fate for a final strike. An eternity later, the storm began to thin. Stars reappeared, faint and trembling. The rift spat the fleet into real space less than half a light hour from Viridian Prime's outer defenses. The Confederacy had not even considered the possibility of an attack from this vector. Their fleets were arrayed toward known jump points, their sensors blind to the wounded shadows emerging from a rift. "Status report," Vance said. Chen's hands moved faster than thought. "Fleet integrity at 73%. Systems operating. We are within strike range." Vance nodded once. Commence the assault. The command unleashed humanity's final wrath. Rail cannons, plasma lances, gravity bombs. Technology once suppressed and forbidden screamed across the void. Confederate defense platforms tried to pivot, raising shields too slowly. Explosions blossomed like dying suns. The enemy fleet scrambled. Virex himself led the countercharge aboard the dreadnought Indomitable. His voice, furious and desperate, flooded open channels. "Crush them! You outnumber them 10-1. But numbers no longer mattered. Vance's forces moved with a cohesion born from shared purpose and shared rage. Carriers launched their last waves of drones. Assault ships punched through shattered gaps, boarding enemy vessels before they could react. Captain Holt led the first boarding team onto the Indomitable, cutting a path through alien corridors slick with blood. Her squad advanced like a machine of flesh and steel, every movement rehearsed, every bullet a promise kept. In the Senate Hall on Viridian Prime, chaos reigned. Senators fled, abandoning their posts as orbital bombardment began to rain fire across the Capitol. Chancellor Lirioth remained, watching the end unfold from a balcony. His old eyes gleamed not with fear, but a terrible satisfaction. "They learned from us," he whispered as the sky burned, "and they surpassed their teachers." On the bridge of the Resolute, alarms flared. A Confederate battleship, its engine screaming at maximum thrust, aimed itself like a spear toward Vance's ship. Impact imminent. Chen shouted. Vance made the decision without hesitation. Full power to forward shields. Prepare counterfire. The Resolute roared, a titan defying oblivion. Railguns stitched molten lines across the battleship's hull, tearing it apart moments before collision. Debris raked across the shields, sending shockwaves through every deck. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Men and women cried out. Still the ship held. Still they fought. In the heart of Viridian Prime, civilian transports attempted to flee. Vance watched them without expression. This was not a battle for mercy. It was an extinction event, an hour stretched into a lifetime. When it ended, Viridian's orbit was a graveyard. Confederate flags burned in silence. The Senate Hall lay in ruins. On the Resolute's bridge, a profound quiet fell. Chin turned, her face pale but triumphant. Primary objectives achieved. Enemy command structure obliterated. Victory is confirmed. The word hung in the air, victory. Not survival. Not retreat. Victory. Vance closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the enormity of it. The generations of suffering. The countless dead. The quiet graves on forgotten worlds. Paid for. Avenged. He opened his eyes. Signal the fleet. Begin reconstruction protocols. Secure all Confederacy data nodes. Prepare for secondary campaigns. Chin hesitated. Commander, they're broken. There's no organized resistance left. Vance's gaze was unrelenting. Not enough. Not yet. We rebuild what they tried to erase. We forge a future they can never threaten again. At his side, Captain Holt removed her helmet, revealing a face cut by scars, her eyes like twin embers. She smiled not with joy, but with grim purpose. They made us monsters, she said. Now we'll show them what monsters can build. Beyond the shattered planet, humanity's fleets turned their bows outward, toward a galaxy suddenly very small, very fragile. The nightmare the Confederacy had birthed would not be contained. Humanity had risen, and it would never fall again.